We never had any help and never will. For this reason, we must form a team that is united, strong, and act as a single whole. Russian President Vladimir Putin so described his priorities and determination for the year 2019 during his New Year address to the nation. Seeing no end to the sanctions imposed by the West, he called on Russia to unite for improving the well-being and quality of life in Russia, while at the same time continue exploring new paths. Russia's so-called pivot to Asia policy, for example, promises great potentials for cooperation. Russia has been moving closer to China, both politically and economically, and the two countries will celebrate 70 years of diplomatic relations in 2019. So what hurdles and headway are on the horizon for Russia in 2019, and what will a closer China-Russia relationship mean for both countries and for the world at large? Joining me today in the studio is Professor Alexander Lukin, head of the Department of International Relations at the National Research University Higher School of Economics, and also a professor at Zhejiang University. Professor Lukin, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
For such an important program.
Thank you very much. Now, as I said, during his New Year address to the nation, President Putin said that Russia has never had and will never have assistance, which is why Russians should act as a cohesive, united and strong team to undertake urgent social, economic and scientific issues. What kind of picture do you think President Putin is trying to paint for the Russian people at this particular moment?
Well, I was listening to this address and I had the feeling first that President Putin decided to be not very political. The main part of the speech was like very general congratulations, that happiness to families and that kind of stuff. And secondly, the idea was that Russian situation is normal. It's a bit difficult for various reasons, but it's generally normal. But people should work more and unite, because the international situation is pretty tense, and not only because in terms of Russia, but generally it's pretty tense for many other countries.
Mm-hmm. Well, he again talked about, Mr. Putin, again talked about making Russia's economy the 5th largest by the end of his current six-year term, which is 2024. Right now, Russia ranks as the 12th largest. Some people have been saying, look, he has said this before, and this target date keeps being delayed, pushed back further down. Do you think it is still reasonable to expect something like that can happen, given the kind of economic policy that has been put in place, which has not been very effective, at least in the near term?
Well, Russia has a lot of potential of growth. It has a lot of resources, educated population, workforce, everything you need. But, as I said, the economic policy should be changed for that. The kind of economic policy as we see now, I don't think can, which is basically a monetarist policy. So the government basically takes money from the population, but it doesn't do anything significant to, like Chinese government, for example, to push the economic growth. So the economic growth is between 0 and 2%, depending on the year. So I think if the economic policy is not changed, it's quite unlikely that Russia's economy is going to grow very fast.
Is that playing into the future direction of Russia's foreign policy in the near term? For instance, in order to shore up its economic growth, is Russia likely to collaborate even further with China under the Belt and Road, for instance, and which also plays a very important foundation for expansion of political ties between the two sides?
I don't think there's much connection between domestic policy and foreign policy. Russia is going to cooperate with China even further, whatever happens internally, because this is I would say, a major international trend. Russia has difficulties because of its because of the attitude of the West towards Russia. It has difficulties with the United States. Relations with the United States are very bad, and there is no prospects of improvement. Relations with Europe are also not very good. Also, although with some countries they are better than with others, and there may be some improvement. But China is, at the moment, Russia's the most reliable partner, and so there is no other option than improvement, or developing deeper cooperation with China.
How much closer do you think these two countries will get in the year 2019? And what kind of external pressure will be there to push these two countries even closer towards each other?
Well, we're already very close. I mean, from political point of view, I think that's about the level we can reach, because the next step would be a formal alliance, but I don't think any of the two countries want a formal alliance. But we have strategic cooperation, we have consultations on every international issue, including regional issues, and what we really need is probably a deeper economic cooperation and deeper level of integration of our economies, more investment, that kind of stuff, more practical things, maybe a bit less words, but more practical mutual economic projects.
Yeah, well, from our perspective, from the perspective of China and Russia, we're saying because of the West's attitude towards us, they're making us rivals, so we are seen and we are perceived to be challenging them and competing with them. But from our perspective, we believe that this is not what we want, right? We're doing this in reaction to this kind of external pressure or environment. What do you think, however, is the kind of challenges we're looking at when China and Russia kind of push closer towards each other, and the United States and the West, on the other hand, continuing finger pointing at China and highlighting the threat we pose to the world order?
Well, of course, nobody wants a conflict, but the price for friendship with the West is too high either for Russia or for China. The West, especially the United States, they don't have a concept of equal relationship. So you have to be a subordinate state. And Russia and China are big and proud countries. They cannot be subordinate countries. So from that point of view, I think that conflict between China and the West in some form is inevitable. I know that Chinese people and the government don't want it, that you are very cautious about even criticizing Western leaders and that kind of stuff, and that's a wise policy. And of course some temporary agreements can be reached, including trade and things like that. But the general trend is still not very positive, because the Americans, they are losing their international control, and they don't like it. So they are going to fight it, and they are going to try to limit China's abilities, or China's desire to become a center of world innovation, of a real center of world economy, and China, of course, cannot give up this desire, cannot give up China dream. So from that point of view, we can basically do nothing about. We can be a little cautious in details, but generally, and that's why Russia and China should cooperate deeper.
How do you look at the prospect, or the saying on the lips of some, that we are potentially entering a new Cold War? Do you see it anyway close to that?
Well, you can call it anything. You can call it a new Cold War. You can call it a tense situation or whatever, but that's the trend. The United States is going to limit the ability of Russia and China and other big countries to pursue independent policies. And well, one of my colleagues aptly called it a unilateral Cold War. So they're fighting us, but we're not fighting them. But this is the situation. We'll have to answer, or at least to react in some way. Because what the United States wants, you can see it on China or on Russia, they want our countries to change completely. The sanctions against Russia are not aimed at any specific thing that Russia can do. For example, they tell Russia not only to give up, say, Crimea or to give up help to Eastern Ukraine, but it also wants to change the government policies. And in China, it also says, it also demands many things. So if you do something, if you even make one concession, they'll demand another one. There's no one thing that you can do and they will be happy about. So that's the problem.
So it's the independence at stake, let's say.
Of course, in the end, they'll demand that your government really listens to them. Like, you know, now in Russia there was a big company, or there's still a big company, Rusal, aluminium company. So they applied sanctions against the head of this company, like against some heads of some Chinese companies. So in the end, they demanded to give the control of the company to Americans. So first they get control of some companies, then they get control of the government, as they had in the 1990s, the control of the Russian government. So that's what they really want.
A Russian perspective, and with that we come to the end of this edition of The Point with Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.